But no one actually talks about the one asset that we can't raise, and that's our time. If you've ever spent hours prepping for a client just to break even, or deliver amazing work that took more out of you than it did give back, or maybe you found yourself thinking, I'm always busy, but why does it feel like I'm so behind? Hi friends, welcome back to the Successful Stylist Academy podcast. I am your host, Ambrosia. We talk about all things marketing, business, finance, and communication for your creative business. But today we want to dive a little bit deeper into how you're spending your time because it is the most underrated business asset. Whether you're a stylist, a designer, a photographer, coach, freelancer, or you run a business that requires you to show up and deliver a service, this episode is for you. You're probably starting your business because you love what you do. I would hope at least. You're maybe good at it and people trust you. And I know that that's the reason why I got into business to begin with too. And maybe if you're like me, you've also been told to quote unquote charge your worth or raise your prices or know your value. But no one actually talks about the one asset that we can't raise, and that's our time. If you've ever spent hours prepping for a client just to break even or deliver amazing work that took more out of you than it did give back, or maybe you found yourself thinking, I'm always busy, but why does it feel like I'm so behind? This episode is for you. So the first place I'd like to start with you is talking about how time is our most valuable business asset. Because a lot of times I think we focus a little too much on the output and not on the input. The output is that final bill of sale, or when you go to check your client out, or when you sell that product. That's the final finished portion of the service or the product that you're selling. But we don't think about the input. So the time that we put into creating it, the things that we had to get to prepare for it, how we had to set up, the travel time that it takes, everything goes into the final product. So I want you to start thinking of it in ways of that rather than just time blocking the actual exchange, right? Here's where most service providers and creatives actually get it wrong. You think your income is tied to your skill, but really it's tied to your time. Time is our most limited, non-renewable resource. Money can be replaced, products can be restocked, but hours, once they're gone, they are gone. And here's the hard truth about it is that if you don't know the value of your time, you'll always undercharge for it because you weren't allocating for it. The worst thing could be that you give it away without even realizing it though. And that's what most of us end up doing. So I'm going to give you a few examples depending on the type of business that you have, just so that I can really break down how that time can actually be eaten up. Let's say you're a photographer and you're charging $450 for a session. But that doesn't include the 2 hours of your emailing, the prepping, the driving, the editing, the delivering your files, or managing your revisions. And I'm sure there's other things in there that I'm not even aware of, right? Or maybe you're a coach. Coach, you can be selling a package, let's say for 90-minute sessions, and that might be about, let's say $250, but then you're not actually realizing what's going into the prep time, the onboarding, the Voxer, or if you're using Slack support, the post-call follow-up. And then maybe you've spent more like 4 hours or more on it than you actually did for the 90-minute session. So those are some little examples. I have one more example. If you're a designer, let's say, and you quote 900 for a website update, but you didn't factor in the fact that you have to do content edits. You have to do client back and forth, of course, or the hours that you spent with the context switching between the jobs. So this is all the little micro examples, I suppose, of the business. I mean, you know your business better than I do. So I probably don't have to give you any more examples for you to realize like, oh yeah, I guess that is kind of part of what it is that I'm charging for. So that is like the value time proposition of the actual final output, which is what you're actually charging for it. So if you're a hairstylist or a makeup artist or an esthetician, like you're in the beauty industry, you're probably on your feet for hours, right? But you're also messaging clients, you're restocking products, you're doing content creation. I mean, these days, like most businesses are all doing content creation. So that's also part of it. And if you're not doing it, then you're hiring someone hourly, or you have overhead that you're paying for, or maybe you're doing, you're working with a VA, but regardless, there's something going out for it. You're still having to pay for that. Maybe you're managing your own schedule as well. That's also taking time. The cleaning, the organization, doing admin in between. I mean, the list goes on. I probably don't even have to emphasize this. I'm probably beating a dead horse at this point, which is the most disgusting saying ever. But that is our invisible labor that's stealing our time and income, to be honest. So this is kind of just opening up the conversation. And now I really want to actually talk about what our time is actually really worth. Because when we actually factor all of those things and we find the value of the time and we find what that cost needs to be, then it's easier for us to allocate how that time is going to be best spent. So let's do a little bit of math together. Let's say you bring in $2,000 per week. And on paper, you're working 20 hours with clients. That's $100 an hour. But is it really? So this is where I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. We're going to take a closer look at this. If your admin and your prep time, let's say, we're going to say loosely about 5 hours. Content creation could be more like 3 hours. Emailing, DMing, client management, that's around 2 hours. Your setup, cleanup, travel, that could be an additional 2 hours. And then there are revisions, follow-ups, client edits. That's another 1 to 2 hours. So now you're at 30 to 35 hours. Suddenly your hourly rate is down $57. And that's before we factored in your taxes, credit card fees, subscription tools, materials, product costs, gear, software. I mean, the list goes on there too. So I probably don't need to even come up with any more examples there. But I definitely want to make sure that we're raising this big disconnection, and I want to bridge that gap a little bit so that way we can have a better thriving business. We can have a more sustainable business to come back to. So your real return might actually be closer to $35 an hour, which isn't bad. But if you're putting that same 2000 into a low effort investment, like an index fund, and I don't want to lose you here. So let's just talk about the stock market in general, like the general rules of the stock market, given history and stuff. And generally, the stock market gives us an 8% return year over year consistently. Sometimes they're up, sometimes it's a little down. We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to say on average it's 8%. So if we were to compare the time that we put into our business, are we at least getting an 8% return on our business? We have to also factor in the looming conversation that is always being brought up and will never go away because it's always something that is going to be ahead of us, but that is called inflation. Inflation is always going to be evident. There are going to be times where it spikes. There's going to be times where it starts to level off a little bit, but we have to also factor in inflation because if we don't keep up with inflation or bypass it, then our time that we're putting into something is going to cost us even more. So I want to reiterate this. If you put that same 2000 into a low effort investment like an index fund, you'd earn 8% per year by doing nothing but showing up consistently. So here is that big question right now. If your business is taking 35 hours a week and paying you less than a basic investment, is that business really working for you? This is not about scaring you, by the way. I mean, this is all stuff I've been thinking about, and I have now had the privilege, I suppose, of being involved in several different businesses, whether I was an investor or shareholder or the owner itself. And I've also dissolved businesses. I've, broken out of partnerships. So I've seen kind of the ripple that can happen within the context of several different types of businesses. And it all is laid out very similarly. So this is a question that I feel like is really worth, talking about consistently and revisiting. But I don't want to scare you about this. I just really want to bring this to the table so that you can build a smarter business. Therefore, it's sustainable and it gives you time freedom, or it gives you the freedom to reinvest that money into other things in your life. This is where creative business owners lose the most time, though. So if we talk about these red flags, then this might help us actually recover some of that time. We're going to talk about the hidden time costs, the places that we don't realize that we're actually giving away energy. So here's what that can look like for those different types of businesses that I was talking about earlier. A photographer, for instance, a photographer who drives 45 minutes to shoot, waits 30 minutes for the client to arrive, and then never charges for the time that they travel or that lost time, right? So that could be one example. The coach that we were talking about earlier, who spends their day off and I'm using the air quotes day off because they're catching up on voice notes, they're answering follow-ups, they're mentally preparing for their next client perhaps. And that day off is not really actually a day off. And when you run your own business, then sometimes the loose term of day off just becomes a little diluted. It starts to leak and bleed into other parts of our life. And we want to make sure that we're honoring our time because that's actually what in time builds to stress. It builds to burnout. It builds to resentment. It builds to us, not having boundaries. So these are all things that kind of flow into the other parts of our lives that we start to see a mishap or like we see an imbalance with. Let's talk about the salon owner for a second who spends 3 hours maybe a week managing their team or dealing with inventory or, overhead at the front desk. Someone calls in sick. I mean, there's a ton of different things that can happen within the business that do happen within the business on a constant basis. So none of that is priced into the services, right? These are all things that we as the business owner are heroically taking on for ourselves, but is actually working for us. A maker or a product-based service provider, perhaps. Like, let's talk about somebody who is actually building something and they're selling a product itself. So maybe it's not so much service-based, but I can use this example all day long. Maybe they're spending their entire Sunday prepping packages or labeling items and answering questions just for that $20 order, right? So I hope that when you're hearing this, that you can see how this can actually bleed into your business as well. And maybe some of the things that you're not thinking about that actually does add up. It's not about working harder, right? So we want to make sure that we're being very smart and strategic with our business. So that way the hard gets to go into other things, which is growth, which lets us build up, not tear down, which allows us to pass the baton over to the next person so that we can actually continue to grow that ceiling and we don't have a glass ceiling that we can no longer grow anymore. It's about realizing how many unpaid hours are stealing your profit. And that's why just raising your prices, using the air quotes again, is incomplete advice. Because charging more without protecting your time is like pouring water into a bucket with holes in it. It's never going to get full. So with knowing all of this, how exactly do we protect and optimize our time? I've got a list of a few things that I actually want to pass on to you, and hopefully this helps you out. But then I'll also have a PDF at the end of this that you can receive as well. Okay, so starting with number one, we want to create a repeatable process that respects time. Whether it's onboarding a client, running a service, or delivering digital work, every task needs a repeatable flow. An example of this could be having a templated welcome email. That's something that you can have set up ahead of time, that when a client onboards or they fill out a form, then they automatically get that welcome email and it has all the information in there. We can use a booking system that prevents the back and forth. So booking software, like for me, I use Gloss Genius, and I choose Gloss Genius on purpose because number one, it has the lowest interest rates. And number two, it has a really easy workflow because they are made for creative businesses. Primarily, they're made for beauty businesses. So they kind of have all that back end stuff worked out for me. So that makes it easier for me personally. So using a booking system that eliminates that back and forth could be that a client actually has a form that they fill out ahead of time. And in the form, there's a disclaimer that says, I'm going to be recording you during the process that you're in here. Are you okay with that? And when they accept that, they're accepting the terms. So that way I don't have to go through that during the consultation, which eats into time. You could have a service bundle that eliminates the over customization, because I think it's really easy for us creatives when we talk to independent people. We want to customize all day long because that's what all people want. And when you get into customization, sometimes you forget about the time that could be allocated into that customization that you may not have accounted for. So that might end up actually making more, that may end up eating into your time more and therefore into your profits. The second thing I would do is batch content and communication. So those are two things that you can kind of streamline, but in general, you're batching it. So the idea of batching is instead of checking your DMs 10 times a day, you can do it twice a day. So I would rather you time block when you're going to do it and make that repeatable. So that way it doesn't fall between the cracks, but also you're not feeling overwhelmed or anxious about it because you know that you have a system and process that you put into it and it's repeatable and that you're following those. And that makes you feel more organized. And that just helps our brain just kind of focus on what it is that's in front of us rather than running in the background like all the tabs in our computer. The other thing you can do is that instead of creating your content daily, batch 3 to 5 at once. And this is not a unusual concept. It's not a new concept, but batching just requires you to put a little bit more effort on the back end. So for instance, you can spend like your Sundays or your Mondays, like have a day that you are consistently coming up with your batch formula, and then have a day that you're shooting that batch formula, and then put those into customized folders that are labeled with each one of them so that you can retrieve them easily and you're not spending time trying to scroll through and find it again in your actual photos. The main gist of this, though, is that you're not behind. I just don't want you to feel like you're behind. You're just fragmented. That's all. And when you're fragmented, it's really easy to just get really overwhelmed and then nothing really gets done, or only portions of it get done, or you finish half of it and it just kind of sits there open and not fully finished. And I, as a creative business, can really relate to this because we're all human. I mean, there's no shaming here. It's just knowing what the problem is and finding a better solution for it rather than knowing what the problem is and letting the problem sit there in the dark. The third piece of advice I want to offer to you is to preset your schedule for your best energy hours. This is something that kind of came to my realization a few years ago when I thought of myself as a night owl. So I would try to get a lot of my work done at the nighttime. But then I realized that no, I'm a night owl because I want to spend my downtime at night relaxing and recharging. That's actually not the time when my brain is actually working the most efficiently. So it was taking me longer to reply to emails. It was taking me longer to even read because I was tired. My eyes were tired. It's like, it's the very end of my day. I'm depleted. So I realized actually that the beginning of my day was the best time to get that workflow going. You don't need to work 9 to 5. You need to work when you're most focused. And that is one of the things that was a big kind of green flag for me. That was my big aha moment because I was able to be really laser focused. So what I started doing is at night, I would build a list for myself when it was fresh in my mind or it was giving me anxiety maybe, and I'm in bed thinking of these things. I would open up my notes. I would remind myself, close my phone, and then I'm relaxed. And then I can fall into my slumber. The next morning, I would go right into it. So then I had that note or that list ready to go. The other thing that was passed on to me just recently from one of my clients who also runs a creative business is she said she does not give herself more than 5 tasks at a time. And the reason why is because mentally it overwhelms her. And then she goes into perfectionist mode, and then she's hard on herself. She doesn't celebrate the fact that she finished 5 things. She's hard on herself because she didn't get 6 things done. So getting a list of 5 things makes it really attainable. And 3 of those 5 things are going to be the harder lifting things that actually matter for your business, that actually, are things that your business needs to thrive. And then the 2 other things could be things that are, things that give back to your energy. That could be the content batching. That could be you vetting out new clients. That could be following up with clients. That could be kind of the back and forth information where you're going to your VA or something like that. So try to batch yourself in that way. And whether this is like a 9 to 1, or you're doing it 3 times a week, or it's a 3 full days in a row type thing, build that flow around your life, not just the industry. The fourth thing you can do is use time-based pricing, not task-based pricing. So stop quoting based on how long something should take. I know that's going to be a hard one for you, especially for somebody in the, I would say in the beauty industry mostly, because we are taught to charge for time. Time is not the only factor, though. We really need to think about things in a different way. We need to think about things in the way that we're giving value. And value is the outcome that the client is expecting of us. Value is something that the client feels that it was worth their time. So it's not our time, it's their time. We really want to think of things in that way. So if you stop quoting based on just how long something is taking, you can start the price based on your expertise, your outcome delivery, the hours that are actually invested. That would include the prep, the admin, and the recovery. So now you can actually build a price or a package or a bundle based on what it is that you're offering to the client, and you're factoring all those other things in. So then that doesn't lead to burnout or resentment. You feel like you're actually operating your business as a business owner and you're covering all those time costs. So that feels really good. So now you're charging for what it costs to produce the result, not just the hands-on time. And that's the thing that I really want to drive home for you. The fifth and final thing that I want to talk about is tracking your time for 1 week. The reason why I say 1 week is because, first of all, it's attainable. It's an easy thing to keep track of. And also, it lets you see enough of the red flags. You don't need to follow it for a whole month. That's overwhelming. Don't deal with that. Just do for 1 week. Use your phone or your notes app or a spreadsheet, whatever works best for you. You can even just use a notebook, but write down every single thing for your business that is client facing and not client facing. At the end of the week, categorize them. What brings in the income? What supports the growth? What is your busy work? What are you putting off to the side that's not being done? Then you reduce, automate, and restructure what doesn't return the value. So of course, the bigger picture, the bird's eye view of this is that time isn't luck. It's engineered, right? So I want to say this so clearly that you see yourself in these shoes and you know that you actually have the ability to walk in those shoes in a different direction. Time freedom doesn't just happen with what we make of it. It happens when you decide to build a business that respects your time. And that starts by knowing what an hour of your life is worth, getting honest with what your current model is really costing you. And it also is by saying no to work that drains you, even if it pays you. And we didn't even talk about that. Sometimes there are projects that we may take on and we think to ourselves, I knew in the back of my head that this wasn't going to be the right fit, but I did it anyway because it paid me money. Sometimes our energy, we need to account for some of that too. So if it doesn't feel right, we need to also have a process within that too. That's a completely different episode we can talk about another time. But scaling is not just about adding clients in. I think that's the main thing that I really want to drive home. It's about reclaiming time so that you can build with intention. So if you want to feel more spacious, more clear, and more in control, it won't happen by chance, and it does happen by design. So this is just the beginning of a conversation. And I think the main thing that I really want to make sure that all of us creative businesses are doing is that we are realizing that time needs more protection. And when you create protection for your time, then you actually start to look at how profitable a business is so that you can actually carve out the time that you need to grow yourself, continue to grow your business, pass the baton over to another person who can be part of your business and part of the growth. Or like I said before, you don't necessarily have to grow your business. Maybe you just want to be smarter with your business and you want to actually allocate that time and resources into other parts of your life. And this is what actually eliminates us from feeling overwhelmed or burnt out or feeling like, oh my gosh, we're going backwards, or I have to close, or I have to do something different, or I don't know. There's a million other things that can happen within the constructs of our business that we don't actually have control over. But this is something that we do have control over. So I really want to make sure that we are capitalizing on that, but we're also claiming our time freedom again too. If this is something that helped you out, I do have a time audit worksheet that I'm gonna put in the show notes. So that will be available to you at any time. You can sign up for that. This is a simple guide to help you track your real-time costs and calculate your hourly return. And then, of course, identify the time that is being underpaid or not accounted for. And then also, I want to leave this on the table for you. If you're ready to go deeper into this, I'm opening a few mentorship spots, and that is for creative businesses. I've worked with all types of people, from a daycare center to a gluten-free bakery to a workout facility. I'm working with a restaurateur right now, but I do work a lot with salon owners and hairstylists since that is my background. So I'll go ahead and leave the application for that in the show notes, and you can apply for that as well. And then we can chat a little bit further on how we can actually build growth within your business. And I want to reassure you that we're all here to do the same thing. We're here to dream big, set goals, take action. And this is something that I want to leave you with, empowering your business and making you feel that you can stay on top of this. You've got this. This is something that we are building over time. Sustainability doesn't happen in an instant, and it doesn't happen in an emergency. It happens with intention. So thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.